we want to find out why is security for remote work such a critical issue for law firms?
There's just a lot of data that is so important that you protect. That doesn't just protect your reputation, but it protects your client's reputation, and maybe contractually and criminally, you might be liable for release of that information. Yeah, so the average time from initial penetration of a network to a security event is over 6 months, wherever they're at, whether it's sitting, in a hotel, you're working, at a client's office, you're working from the moon, it's that you're in a secure environment.
You're listening to Stimulus Tech Talk, a conversation-based podcast created by Stimulus Technologies that covers a range of topics related to business and technology.
Welcome to Stimulus Tech Talk. I am Sherry Lipp, the marketing manager at Stimulus Technologies, and I am here with Nathan Whittacre, the CEO of Stimulus Technologies. And today we are going to be talking about remote work, particularly when it pertains to law firms and the legal industry. Welcome, Nathan.
Thanks, Sherry, and welcome everybody to the podcast.
So we've talked about remote work quite a bit, although not as much recently, but it still exists. And for law firms, things can be critical at any point in time when you're working. So we want to stay up, but we want to find out why is security for remote work such a critical issue for law firms?
Well, I think let's talk about remote work to begin with. I think a lot of people think, well, I don't have any employees that work from home, but I'm sure that most lawyers are working at some point, either in a client's office, maybe at court, maybe while traveling. There's certainly a lot of concerns about accessing data and having that data protected wherever you're at. So if you have a mobile device, a laptop that you take out of the office, or even a desktop that you have in the office, um, it is really important that you're protecting the data that's on there or in the cloud because, as you have a lot of very confidential data. It could be personally identifiable data, it could be data related to a business transaction that's under NDA, it could be a court case that you want to protect that data, that information that you're presenting in a case. There's just a lot of data that is so important that you protect. That doesn't just protect your reputation, but it protects your client's reputation, and maybe contractually and criminally, you might be liable for release of that information. So it's just essential to protect the data. I mean, there's just so much highly sensitive data that you have on your networks and on your devices.
So in the last episode, we were trying to remember a phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth, and we could not remember. But the second the second part of the phrase is a pound of cure,
There we
which
go.
I think illustrates a lot of what we're talking about because we're talking about preventing it is going to be a lot easier than fixing it. So when we're talking about preventing um, problems with legal firms, like what are they facing if they're corrupted or they go down?
A lot of things are time sensitive. It might be if you're a business attorney, for example, you might be working on, closing documents that are due for some type of business transaction, like a M&A transaction that you're assisting with. Maybe there's wire deadlines or closing deadlines, and if you lose access to your data or lose the data, that could be critical and harmful to your clients. If you have court cases, if you're a litigator, there may be times that are set that you have to have data into the courts, and that's very time sensitive data that is important. So making sure that you have access to the data in a timely manner, that you're not losing or exposing that data before it's sent to who is supposed to go to. Again, it's just essential that you have the data when you want, and that it's protected and encrypted in all forms of communication.
So, we're talking about remote work. So, what are the particular security risks with remote work? Since, in general and for law firms.
Well, I think when we talk about data, there's two things we have to protect uh, for the data. It's when the data is at rest or when the data is in transit. And so let's talk about at rest for a minute. So on your laptop that you're carrying around, you most likely have confidential data stored on that device. And it's at rest because it's actually stored in the memory of that device. And you might say, well, it's in the cloud. I store it, all my data is stored in some type of cloud environment. More likely than not, there may be copies of it temporarily stored on your computer, on your device. Or, there's times that you download a PDF file or you save to PDF in your documents or your downloads folder. So more likely than not, you have confidential data that's stored at rest on your laptop. And it's essential that that data is encrypted. So we recommend, full drive encryption on any mobile device and actually any device in your office because even a desktop PC can be stolen. So having that data fully encrypted and the entire device fully encrypted is essential. There's plenty of court cases, plenty of cases out there that a person had social security numbers. This happens to the government laptops all the time. Laptop device had 10 million social security numbers on it, and it was stolen out of the back seat of a car or left in a cab or something like that. So and it was completely unencrypted. So it's really essential that you have full device encryption so that if your device is stolen, that they wouldn't have access to the data. And then the next thing is what's in transit. So when you're downloading data from the cloud or you're working remotely, you are sending data back and forth to external devices, whether that's the cloud, whether it's through a VPN to your office, whatever it may be. And we want to make sure that those connections are fully encrypted also. So for the most part today, most 99.9% of websites are encrypted. And you have that little lock up at the top of the screen that shows the website's encrypted. So more likely than not, you're sending data through an encrypted communication to a website. But websites can still be spoofed. So you want to make sure that you're using tools to ensure that you're connecting to secure websites, the right website and connecting to that right website securely. So um, if you're working on sensitive data, it, I would recommend not connecting to unsecured Wi-Fi connections. So if you're at an airport, if you're in a hotel and you're doing something um, with confidential data, much better to use like a hotspot on your cell phone that that connection is encrypted over the air through the Wi-Fi signal than to use an unsecure Wi-Fi. It's just a double protection. So that's the biggest question that we have is making sure that you're working with sites that are encrypting it in transit and that you're connecting to secure environments. So something like a mobile hotspot or your hotspot that you have on your cell phone is much better than using a public Wi-Fi.
And if you're using a public Wi-Fi, if you are, if you did connect to it, could that compromise your attorney-client privilege?
That would be a question for an attorney.
True.
I guess. Potentially. I mean, I think if any of the data gets out, that's the concern is, who allowed that to happen. And they're going to look to see, if something gets out, the harmed party is going to look to see how that was released. And it could go back to an unencrypted laptop. It could go back to an unsecured channel. And your device remembers all the Wi-Fi connections that you've had. And so, in a forensic investigation, a security professional could go in and say, well, you connected to, the Harry Reid International Airport's, unsecure Wi-Fi connection. That's probably where the case files were released. You were on an airplane at that time. So I'm sure that it could be discovered when that happens. So I would certainly recommend not connecting to those unsecure websites or unsecure Wi-Fi networks.
And what about connecting through a VPN? Is that enough security?
It's good. It's not excellent. And I'll give you an example where we have some concerns about VPNs. There are older VPNs on older routers that may give the appearance of encryption, but for example, on older sonic wall routers right now, there's a zero-day attack that allows hackers to use that VPN connection to get into your office. So we're recommending more and more people move away from VPN connections to a static point to these newer style that are a zero trust style VPN. So there's new um, VPN style tools that allow you to connect into your office, but it's much more secure. So without getting into the technical details, we're happy to talk to you about it one on one. Feel free to reach out to our office. But these zero trust connections are much better than an older style VPN. We and then it's unfortunate we've been for many years Stimulus Technologies has offered clients um, VPN access to their offices, and we're now recommending moving away to a zero trust type network that authenticates the connection every time along all the points of the connection. So, another option beyond VPN is to always connect to a virtual desktop. So you have a virtual desktop environment that you connect to, and that your data is stored in a virtual environment. And then you can set up multi-factor authentication to get into that full encryption into that environment. And then in that case, your data is not stored on your laptop. It's all just screenshots of the data coming in to your laptop, and there's no data, like files being transmitted back and forth. And so we like a virtual desktop environment much better than a VPN also.
And that kind of brings me to my next topic. If you're logging in, if you have a CRM type of program, or the legal software where you're keeping all your data, all your files, and what you're looking at, so you're logging into something that's like online based, is that more secure, or is it the same? I mean, what security precautions do we need there?
Yeah, I think if you're accessing those type of environments, I kind of go back to my first comment, is making sure that you're not downloading the data, downloading the file, downloading the PDFs on those devices. That's where, that data at rest comes in, because you might, download the data to print it out or have it available offline if you're at a, business meeting or in a courtroom. So yeah, I think it helps, whether you're using something like, my case or one of these online tools, or using Microsoft's OneDrive to store your data. It's still essential that you're ensuring that your data provider has safeguards themselves. You can ask them to provide like a SOC 2 compliant document, so that they're auditing their systems and ensuring that they're complying with certain level of regulations. And then making sure your access to those systems are behind security mechanisms like multi-factor authentication and other security layers, to ensure that a hacker can't use your identity to get into your case files.
And what about using a non-work device? So you might think, well, I'm just logging in. What's the difference? what's the parameters there for
Uh,
security?
yeah, don't do it. Just don't do it. Yeah, the issue is a non-work device could have keyloggers, so logging your usernames and passwords. It could have malware in it that's potentially downloading data off that environment. We really recommend don't use your kid's computer or your kid's iPad, or the hotel little device at the hotel to get in. Make sure that you're using a device to access your data that has all the security protections that we talk about on this podcast in place.
And so, what do we work with some from law firms? Well, what does stimulus do specifically for legal firms?
One of the things we're talking about a lot today is identity protection. And so we do a wide variety of things for law firms. But what we're finding is that law firms are a specific target for identity breach or social engineering to get the identity. So, give you a case of a firm that came to us after the incident happened. Um, the One of the paralegals at this firm had, and I have permission to share this. They wanted me to share this as a specific example of what can happen. So, one of the paralegals at the law firm had clicked on a link, and they that that allowed the hackers to get into that paralegal's email, and they watched for months of the type of communications that this paralegal was having between them and their clients, and they realized that this firm handled, without disclosing too much information, but could handle payouts from certain, from cases. And so they eventually impersonated one of their clients, and and they followed the case, and they requested when that payout was going to happen, um, for the client. And the paralegal wired the funds over six figures to the hackers rather than their actual client. And then the client called up the office and said, "Hey, my case is settled. Where are my funds?" And they said, "Well, we already sent them to you. You asked for it to go to this wire instructions." And the law firm didn't follow their actual. They had procedures to verify the information, and they didn't follow them. This paralegal didn't, and they ended up wiring the funds to this hacker group, and they were long gone by the time they figured out what had happened. But that's the kind of stuff that we have to be extremely careful of, is identity fraud. They could you know, change the identity of your clients, or impersonate a client, maybe impersonate you, maybe impersonate one of your staff. But that is really the type of protection that we have to put in place today, because that's where the hackers are coming at, especially law firms, because they know that often they're dealing with highly stressful situations, and they have potential a lot of important information, or payments, or things that could occur, that they're guiding people through. So, but we handle everything from basic IT services like help desk support, all the way to, like I was talking about, the cybersecurity, identity protection, ensuring your operations are secure and occurring securely for your environment.
And do you find that criminals are actually spending this kind of time casing places to exploit human error or exploit vulnerabilities? I think we think of them as attacks, like they're sudden, but are they spending a lot of time on this?
Yeah, so the average time from initial penetration of a network to a security event is over 6 months. So they live in your environment, learning how you do business for a very long time, and then they will execute on it at the most vulnerable time for the firm. So it is really essential that you have ongoing monitoring, so that it's not just right before the breach or after a breach or when something happens. They are in their environment for a long time, and they don't, you wouldn't know that they're there. They do a lot of things to cover up their tracks, so that you have no idea that they're in your environment.
And is that one of the kind of things that we can help monitor for?
Yeah, I absolutely. So, a case in point, let's go back to VPNs for a minute. Um, we had an incident the other day that a client's older style VPN was compromised. And we talked about multi-layer protections on an environment. The VPN, as great as it was susceptible to that zero-day attack that we were talking about. There was no patch from the vendor to protect this VPN, so it wasn't it wasn't that the device was not up to date, but the attackers were able to get in. But the second layer of protection, of monitoring, immediately flagged us that there was something wrong, and they shut down the attack before it did any harm to the environment. So having multiple layers of protection in place when one of them breaks, which it's very potential that one of your security mechanisms breaks, that there's something else that's also monitoring to ensure that that it doesn't get any further. So having that constant protection, constant monitoring, a 24-hour security operations center, watching that constantly and shutting it down before it causes real problems, is essential. And that's the kind of stuff that we do, is ensure that 24/7, everything's being monitored. That when those breaches happen, because I'm not saying if, when a breach happens, that there's action being taken right away. In that environment, it was actually could have been really bad, but in our case, it was shut down immediately. We had to change a couple of passwords and shut down a couple of accounts, and it was cleaned up, without any harm to the business operations.
And to close it out on, working remotely and law firms, how do we've helped a lot of, since COVID, we've helped a lot of businesses work remotely. And does the security, have we gotten to a point where the security is the same? Like we can set it up whether they're in the office or anywhere, as long as they're using the correct the correct tools.
Yeah, I think, we still highly recommend that you're running on a, enterprise device, is what you're asking me before. We want to make sure that, whatever device you're using for your work is a secured device. I think that's first and foremost, whether it's at home or in the office. So that's the first step. And then, we can put the type of protection in place, on a device wherever it is. We used to, back in the day, we used to say, okay, everything behind the firewall is secure. So all the devices on your corporate network, are secure. But now we have to make sure that wherever they're at, whether it's sitting, in a hotel, you're working, at a client's office, you're working from the moon, it's that you're in a secure environment, and that you can feel confident that you're keeping that attorney-client privilege, you're abiding by all the NDAs, everything you've agreed to, you're abiding by, and more importantly, that you can get your work done and to get it done timely. You know that you're going to meet your deadlines and be successful in the work that you're doing, and don't have to worry about it.
Yes, definitely. And I kind of hope we do get to set somebody up on the moon eventually.
I am hoping. It's one of to my wife's chagrin, I will sign up, hopefully, for a trip to this outer space. That's one thing that I'd like to do in my lifetime. It's on my
It's on
bucket list, and
your
I
on your
think it's
bucket list, definitely.
commercial space travel. I think it's more and more likely, but I don't know if I want to go live on the moon. But hopefully, we don't have to litigate there. That's my only hope.
I wouldn't mind seeing you in space. I just don't want to do the part where you leave the Earth. Yes, it would definitely be exciting. Well, thanks, Nathan, and thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you in the next one.